Because I had just recently been employed for a couple of weeks as a police officer, I was riding with a seasoned officer, Larry Benoit. The four officers I just described went into there to effect an arrest. Larry Benoit and I stayed on the outside where we could monitor the door in case there were problems that developed. To my understanding, Mr. Holmes at that time, who is his uncle, was seated at the bar with a 38 or 357 revolver, 6-shot revolver in his waistband. As they got closer to the door, Mr. Farragut started to resist. The officers were subduing him, and Mr. Holmes got off of the bar stool he was sitting on, got in a crouch position, and fired indiscriminately into the officers. As things would turn out, his nephew was killed by one of the bullets that he shot. And in particular, that bullet went through the wrist of Larry Benoit, and then it penetrated Mr. Farragut's skull, and then it lodged into the sinus of Mr. Benoit. But for that, Mr. Benoit would be dead. He would have had a shot to the head. Buddy Sandoval received a shot to the shoulder. He was paralyzed, and it pretty much ended his career. The man who suffered the most tragic injury was Keith Shasta. He was shot in the back and paralyzed for the rest of his life until he died on March 10th of 2008 and was honored as a line of duty death by the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial.
We just heard from the sheriff of Lafourche Parish, who was a rookie at the time that this crime happened 44 years ago. Now we're about to watch the parole hearing of this man who really just seems without reason started to fire into the crowd, killing his own nephew and brutally wounding multiple police officers. I'll unpack it with many details at the end.
Our first remote location this morning is at Elaine Hunt Correctional Center. Good morning, Warden Bickham. Would you and your staff please introduce yourself for the record?
I will. Good morning, board. It's me, Warden Dusty Bickham.
Chris LeBlanc, classification.
Joe Buttress, Assistant Warden. Terry Grady, Director of Medical and Mental Health Services. That's it.
Thank you. All right, before we turn it over to Mr. Holmes, let me just read some information into the record. I didn't do that at the onset. Mr. Holmes is classified as a first felony offender. He is currently, as his attorney said, serving a 100-year sentence, having been sentenced in Lafourche Parish on April 23rd, 1981 for 3 counts of attempted first-degree murder. His parole eligibility date was June 28, 2013. He does have a good time release date. That's a mandatory release date, and that date is April 29, 2031. Thank you. So, Ms. Hemingway, we would like to hear from Mr. Holmes why he believes we should grant favorably to.
So they want to know, so you need to tell them why you think that you should be released today.
Oh. Why? Okay. I was in the club and go to the bathroom, and I'll come back and someone told me, said my little nephew was getting beat up and getting killed on the club. I really didn't know what would happen. You understand what I'm talking about? But until I came in and I saw what I saw, and then they were beating him up with a nice stick and all that. So I came to the aid and did what I did, but I'm very sorry for what I did, inside the club. I was very sorry, very remorseful for what I've done. As a result, it was Mardi Gras and I was drinking.
But tell them why you should be released today. They want to know why you should be released today. Why do you think you should be released today? That's what they want to hear.
Why I did.
Why should you be released today?
Why you should be granted parole?
I should be granted parole. Well, I'm gonna say it like this. For what I did, I feel like, I was wrong for what I did, but I played myself. I played myself before the board this morning, to forgive me what I've done and to give me another chance to be, to get out there and be with my family and to be with my family and my loved ones because I had been away from a long time, and I got a daughter right now. She's on that first stage cancer, and she really needs me. It's not so much about my family, but I'm thinking about the family of the other people as well, because it really hurt me. And I made a mistake during my younger years, and I'm very sorry, very remorseful for what I've done. And I'm not trying to justify myself right when I'm wrong. And I just place myself upon the mercy of the Lord to give me another chance to be home with my family. And I'm very sorry, remorseful for it. And I take full responsibility of everything what I made a mistake and done.
All right, thank you, Mr. Holmes. Warden Bickham, is there anything you could share with us about Mr. Holmes?
Good morning. Not really. I've only been here a few weeks. I haven't gotten familiar with him, so the records have to speak for itself.
Okay. All right, thank you, sir. So now we'll hear from the folks who want to speak in support. Mr. Kerry Myers with the Parole Project.
Good morning, Board. Kerry Myers with Louisiana Parole Project. We supported Mr. Holmes at his last hearing, and we continue to support him. Mr. Holmes has served now 44 years for a crime, obviously, that was extremely serious. And is actually his outstanding record during incarceration to grant his parole today.
All right, thank you. And I don't have an indication. Does Mr. Holmes' son wish to say a few words?
Yes. You know, and I asked him a question because for a long time, for a very, very long time, and it's probably hard to say, but I'm gonna be honest, I kind of hated my father for that, for the things that he done to my family, not just my family, but the officer family, his daughter, his wife, and we sat down and we talked, and he told me, son, he said, if I can do it all again, I would change a lot of things that I've done that time. I said, so, you know, over the years, I watched his growth, you know, the programs that he was in and things that he done, you know, and even much when I come to this facility, I see the growth with him, with interacting with the officers here, you know, and so I'm just here in the support of my father and hopefully the family. I know it's tough for him. I know how hard it is because I lost my mother a few months ago, so I know how hard it is for the daughter and the wife and their family. So my heart goes out to them, you know. But I mean, I thank God for the board. And thank God for each one of these people here. These two ladies here. That's pretty much all I have.
All right, well, we appreciate your input. Thank you so much. We'll move on and hear from the opposition now. Sheriff, could we hear from you first?
Yes, Madam Chairman and members of the board. Thank you. My name is Craig Weber. I am the Sheriff of Lafourche Parish. I've been serving in this capacity since 1992. With respect to this particular hearing, I was a young police officer. I was 18 years old on February 19th, 1980, which was a Tuesday, and it was a Tuesday of Mardi Gras. Mr. Holmes, among several hundred other people, were gathered at a lounge called the Godfather of Soul, which no longer exists. It was located at 10th and Narrow Street in the city of Thibodeau. It was about 10:30 that night, and this particular building, the entrance to the building had a single door in the middle of the building. It was a rectangular shaped building, long and narrow. And when you entered into the front door, the entire right side of the building had a bar that kind of went from front to back. And then the left side was where patrons would gather and dance and what have you, and the restrooms were in the back. The officers received a call of domestic violence. Mr. Holmes alluded to his nephew. His nephew's name was Wilmer Farragut. Mr. Farragut had committed a battery upon a woman he was seeing at the time. He then went into the lounge, to the back of the lounge. Several officers responded. Wayne Dagg responded, Buddy Santamon responded, Keith Chasson responded, and the shift supervisor that night, Ronald Benoit, responded. Because I had just recently been employed for a couple of weeks as a police officer, I was riding with a seasoned officer, Larry Benoit. The four officers I just described went into there to effect an arrest. Larry Benoit and I stayed on the outside where we could monitor the door in case there were problems that developed. They located Mr. Farragut. They took him into custody, and the four officers were escorting him out to the front of the building from the rear of the building. To my understanding, Mr. Holmes at that time, who is his uncle, was seated at the bar with a 38 or 357 revolver, 6-shot revolver in his waistband. As they got closer to the door, Mr. Farragut started to resist. The officers were subduing him, and Mr. Holmes got off of the bar stool he was sitting on, got in a crouch position, and fired indiscriminately into the officers. As things would turn out, his nephew was killed by one of the bullets that he shot. And in particular, that bullet went through the wrist of Larry Benoit, and then it penetrated Mr. Farragut's skull, and then it lodged into the sinus of Mr. Benoit. But for that, Mr. Benoit would be dead. He would have had a shot to the head. Buddy Santamon received a shot to the shoulder. He was paralyzed, and it pretty much ended his career. The man who suffered the most tragic injury was Keith Chasson. He was shot in the back and paralyzed for the rest of his life until he died on March 10th of 2008 and was honored as a line of duty death by the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial. I, as an officer, was approaching the building in an attempt to see if we could assist, and there was total pandemonium, as you can imagine. I remember seeing the muzzle flash of the gun from throughout the door. Larry took cover on the side of the car, and Wayne was able to escape. As Mr. Holmes exited, we initiated gunfire. He was injured and subsequently taken to the hospital and recovered. I want to commend him on the things that he's accomplished in prison. It's certainly noteworthy. I also want to offer to him that in terms of forgiveness can be given, but forgiveness does not equate to release. I believe that his sentence was a just sentence. I mentioned that, but for the fact that that bullet went through his nephew's head, and I don't know why at the time, I didn't take the time to research it. He was not prosecuted for the murder of his nephew because he was certainly responsible for it. Ronald Benoit would have died, and he would have faced a first-degree murder of a police officer, and in all likelihood been sentenced to death with the other two officers who had those serious injuries. Captain Chasson, he retired as a captain, was a remarkable individual. He never let his injuries get in the way of his commitment to the citizens of Thibodeau, but he was a young man. He was just starting his career. I think he was 23 maybe when he got injured and was confined to a wheelchair for the rest of his life. So I would like to offer that this was an ambush on police officers. Mr. Holmes was not being arrested. The officers had no interaction with him whatsoever. He made a decision, an irrevocable decision, to ambush and murder police officers. He almost succeeded, but didn't quite succeed. But I don't think just the good fortune of having people not die should mitigate the fact that this crime was so serious that it's one that I believe that demands that he spend his sentence there. I know he's talked about the things that he's missed with his family, and that's certainly a difficult thing for any human being. But I look at the families of those officers who are all now deceased. Every one of them are now deceased. And I don't think, too, that just because Mr. Holmes outlived the victims of his crime should mitigate against the lessening of his sentence and his release. Thank you for the opportunity, and I respectfully request that despite the things that Mr. Holmes has accomplished and can continue to accomplish, because he has the benefit of life. He has the benefit of knowing his family and getting up in the morning and breathing air that they don't have. I would ask that he be given his sentence I oppose as a release, and that he serve out the sentence that he was given by the court.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for sharing that information with us. We appreciate it. I'm going to just go in the order that I have you on my list, if you don't mind, for those of you who are here that want to speak. First, I have Linda Roberts. All right, Mr. Holmes's case has been assigned to Mr. Byer. He'll take the lead on questions.
Well, let me thank Sheriff Weber for doing such an excellent job of explaining the case. I don't have to say anything about that part of it. I do need to note that there is extreme law enforcement opposition and victim opposition in this case, both current and over the years for the prior investigations. My question for you, Mr. Holmes, is seems like it. Why did you shoot the officers? What were you thinking? The guy was just being arrested for a misdemeanor. What caused that? What caused you to do what you did that night?
I guess through drinking and, and doing the Mardi Gras of that time, I just, but it wasn't something that I really wanted to do, but through drinking and stuff like that. And one of the police, I didn't really know if all of the police they had on kinky clothes back. And I didn't know what's what. It wasn't civilian clothes.
So did you tell him to let him go or anything like that, or you just started shooting at him without saying a word?
Well, during that time when somebody had came in and told me about what's going on in the club like that, my nephew was getting killed and things like that. I just went out of my mind. And I'm very sorry for that. Very sorry, very remorseful for that. As a result of drinking and getting high. I'm sorry. And I just pray that y'all just, I played myself on the race of the Lord. Give me another chance. It won't happen again. Nothing like that will never happen again, because throughout all those self-help programs, and since I've been incarcerated 44 years, I've learned a lot. I learned to discipline myself. And I just pray that I get another chance back to society to see my family and have them. And I'm very sorry for what had happened to the family of these officers who were involved. And I'm very sorry because I made a mistake, but I'm fully responsible for my action. And I just place myself upon the mercy to give me another chance. And it won't ever happen again. I promise, never happen again. None of that. It's just through drinking, having fun, and it's happening.
All right. Thank you. That's all the question I had.
All right.
I just got one question.
Mr. Freeman?
What is the charge in 1971 about first degree murder reduced to manslaughter?
Oh, everything was out.
What did they say?
I didn't have to go to court, no time on that.
They want to know what happened though with that. What was that charge about?
Hmm?
They want to know why you had that charge in 1970. Like what happened for you to get that charge?
Oh, that happened in the club, Hay-Bear Ball.
Was the gun involved in that incident?
And I went to the bathroom to take a leak and then he just must have had something against me. I went fishing and then after that in my boat, And, so he wanted some fish, and I told him my sister had a ballroom, had a club, and she was selling. I didn't have none. I didn't catch anything, no fish at all. I had fish, but it was something that I bought from somebody out there while I was out there. But that was it on that. Then he pulled out his revolver and he shot me. And I shot back. He shot me in my arm.
And maybe Gordon, you could help with this. Or I see Mr. Holmes has been in and out of the hospital for the past, 3 years?
DJ, you got anything?
Yes, ma'am. What about it, Ms. Renaz? Anything in particular that you're curious about? He does have a laundry list of medical conditions. I mean, they are all currently stable right now.
That's
He
right.
wouldn't be someone that we would look at as a compassionate release or medical parole or anything like that at this time.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was looking for. I appreciate it. Okay, I don't see any other questions, so I think that the panel is prepared to vote unless Ms. Hemingway, is there anything you'd like to say to close it out?
No, if I can, Ms. Renata, can I'd just like to clarify some things if I could right quick.
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. And really it's just based on Mr. Holmes' kind of limited our ability to articulate some of the things that he's done, and it's likely based on his age and just his cognitive ability at this age. And so I would like to, I know Ms. Hemingway produced a brief that provides this information, but I would like to just before the board to talk about some of the things that Mr. Holmes has done over the 44 years, his intense dedication to his faith, and the humbling experience it was transforming himself to a man of God, both learning and understanding and truly feeling the great harm that he caused to the officers, their families, his own family, and his community. As he's been able to talk about, alcohol played a huge role in just the demise of his life while he was not, before he came to prison. And the brief will show you over 15 years of AA and substance abuse. Also over 20 classes that address behavior management, changing his way of thinking. So it changes his actions, which ultimately change one's life through behavior, right? And his dedication to others through hospice volunteering, the Catholic Men's Fellowship, and the Lifers Association. So today we're merely asking the committee to evaluate the now 76-year-old Joseph Holmes based on whether or not he poses a risk to public safety if he serves the remainder of his sentence on parole. As the sentence does not go away, but rather he's under the control of the Department of Probation and Parole for the remainder of his life. Obviously, he's not going to make it to 100 years. And so just based on his rehabilitation, his age, his remorse, and provided that he no longer poses a threat to society, we just pray that the board would allow him to serve the remainder of his sentence on parole. With any conditions the board deems necessary, obviously, he's not planning to return to that community. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Mr. Byron.
All right, Mr. Holmes, today I'm gonna vote to deny your parole due to the seriousness and nature of the crime where 3 police officers were shot and another person was murdered, and also based on the strong law enforcement and victim opposition.
Mr. Tillis.
Mr. Holmes, it seems like you've made a change in your life, and I congratulate you for that. But because of the seriousness of this situation and the strong opposition, I hope that you continue to better yourself while you're incarcerated. My vote today is going to be to deny.
Mrs. Ledoux. Mr. Holmes, I'm a little surprised that you were not charged with your nephew's murder. And, you know, if you take that into consideration, your sentence would have been even more severe. My vote is to deny. I don't want to lessen the fact that you've done a good job
while incarcerated, and hope to continue along that track. But many times when someone takes the life of another person, it's in a conflict. You had no dog in the fight, and you shot into a group of officers, and that's a very serious crime.
Mr. Freeman.
Okay, I concur. I deny based on law enforcement, victim opposition, and definitely the nature of offense. I'm just not getting into it, but that was very heinous. So my vote is to deny.
All right, so Mr. Holmes, I want to commend you for your hospice volunteer work. I know that's very difficult. And you do have, I do believe you're sorry for what happened. You do have a good prison record, but based on, but you do have an out date. Yeah, I got a good time release date. And so based on the opposition that's been expressed here today, and the fact that you do have a mandatory release date in 2031, my vote today is to deny you. So today, sir, your parole's been denied by unanimous vote. Good luck to you.
This is when he was denied back in 2013. So local law enforcement officials and family members watched Tuesday as parole was denied for a man who was sent to prison for shooting 3 officers in 1980. Joseph Holmes serving 99 years in state prison for 3 counts of attempted murder for the shooting of Captain Keith, Ronald Benoit, and Buddy St. Amand. And he kills someone. So you shoot. Okay, he was shot in the spine. The bullet paralyzed him from the waist down, and complications from the injury ultimately led to his death in 2008. Monday, Holmes was the first parole hearing since his death. It was very heartbreaking because this is the first time that I've been to one of the hearings without my brother present. It was harder, but we also wanted to make sure that we represented my brother, and well, that would be denied his request. The 5-person parole board unanimously denied Holmes' request to be freed. There was no parole for my father. There was no change in what happened that night, said the victim's daughter. Holmes couldn't take back his actions, and we are very glad that way it turned out. About 10:30 p.m. Mardi Gras night, 1980, the 3 officers were called to the now demolished Godfather of Soul Bar near Narrow Street for a DV abuse complaint. The officers met with a distressed woman outside the bar and took statements from a witness. They went into the bar to apprehend Wilmore Farragut for allegedly pushing the woman from a bar stool. Sheriff Craig Weber, who was a rookie officer at the time, was called in as backup and was sitting outside the bar when the melee broke loose. Of course, that's who we just heard leave a very strong statement. Craig said that the officers brought Farragut towards the door. Holmes stood up from the bar and began shooting his .357 revolver at the officers. One bullet struck the head. Farragut, who was Holmes' nephew, and he died on the scene. As Holmes neared the door of the bar, Weber and the other officers opened fire. They hit Holmes multiple times, but he fled the scene and was found and arrested shortly after. Benoit took 4 bullets, according to family. St. Amand suffered partial paralysis to his shoulder, and the officer was down and never got up under his own power again. 23-year-old Jason, who had agreed to work overtime that night because of the holiday, was now paralyzed. I made sure I would be there personally to impress the parole board that people die off. Their voices have been silenced by the grave, said Craig. But it is important that the parole board members see the commitment of his family and law enforcement. Craig spoke to the board, and other officers, police department attended as well. Another 300 people wrote letters to the board urging it to deny the request. I was very proud that they showed their support like they did. Keith's widow, Debbie, the panel said it was the most opposition they had seen to a parole request. Though Keith was confined to a wheelchair, he continued to work in the records division of the department, moving up the ranks to captain. He worked as the police department until he died in 2008. Given that the injuries he sustained contributed to his death at age 51, he's memorialized in Washington, D.C. as an officer killed in the line of duty. It's pretty intense, pretty insane. Again, I think it blows one mind, as Mrs. Ledoux said, that he wasn't prosecuted for killing his own nephew. You find out here that he had actually killed another man previously. It's weird. The DA just dropped the ball on this, and it's hard to understand that, being that 3 police officers were shot, 2 were paralyzed, and a man was killed, and he's not. And I guess I don't even understand why he has their parole eligibility. Judges messed up. I don't even think this is an Act 122 thing that he has parole eligibility, because that first parole hearing came in, what year is it? In 2008. Act 122 only came out like 5 years ago or something. So I don't understand. But because some lazy DA, really lazy DA or lazy judge, it then affects the victims' lives for decades, because they have to go through this. And that's just madness. But here you see it. Laziness prevails. And this is not like legislation. I think this is pure laziness. They offered a deal. They didn't go to trial. That doesn't make sense. You don't really see this often with police officers. They like to throw the book. But in this case, they for some reason didn't. And I guess if we can learn from this is that sometimes injustice is a full opportunity provider, whether you're a police officer or a child. It happens to everyone, more so to children, but also to police themselves. And thank you, Sir Richard, for the info. And one last thing, if you noticed how our favorite warden is now in this prison, not in this prison, but serving this prison, it's because of a scandal. So DOC removes Eline Hunt Correctional Center warden. So the Louisiana Department of Public Safety and Corrections has placed Eline Hunt Correctional Center head warden Donnie Bertolin on suspension pending the investigation. The department relieved him of official duties as head warden of Hunt effective immediately. And according to the press release from DOC, the above actions were taken due to concerns of his oversight of the prison, including investigation of alleged inappropriate use of force incident over the weekend. The department is also placed on suspension pending investigation of correctional officer as part of this. Dixon Correctional Institute Warden Edward Dusty Bickham will serve as interim on-site head warden in Eline Hunt Correctional Center. So I think Dusty is viewed internally as the crack warden. The idea that they bring him in to solve what seems to be a problem that the press has picked up on and things like that at this prison. And Dusty is, I do think he's a special warden. You can tell he cares. He knows his inmates like well. He doesn't need to go through the record books usually. He's like, he off the cusp understands them. You can see he builds relationships and real rapport, and they respect. There's mutual respect, and when they get granted, he's genuinely very happy for them. And so nice to see that he's still working, because we've missed him a while at his old post. And thank you, Sir Richard, for calling that out. And now with that,
he's admitted to a minimum of 4 murders, some of which have gained national attention. And Ms. Manassa, he actually did confess later to that 1984 murder of which he was acquitted. He has admitted to the killing of Maria Marshall in Ocean County, New Jersey. That was a contract killing. He is, and as you mentioned, he admitted less than 10 years ago, he admitted in Caddo District Court involvement in another murder. He is extreme danger to the public. He's an extreme danger to those who have testified against him. He has a history of being a professional criminal and a contract killer.
Case that spans over 3 decades is back in the spotlight. 35 years ago, Deanna Montgomery was murdered. In May of this year, Shreveport police named 2 people responsible for her death. One is her husband, James Montgomery. The other is this man, Larry Thompson Sr., who is already serving an 80-year prison sentence for armed robbery. KSLA News 12 reporter Fred Childers is at the Caddo Parish Courthouse, where Thompson faced a judge for the case that had been cold for 35 years. And Fred, can you tell us what happened in court today?
Larry Thompson Sr. pled not guilty to that charge of second-degree murder. He was also appointed an attorney after he told the Caddo judge that he could not afford one. Now, this is video of Thompson arriving at the Caddo Parish Courthouse just before 1 o'clock today, straight from Angola Prison, where he's serving that 80-year sentence. And that sentence is related to an armed robbery In fact, it's a very high-profile case that played out here in the streets of the Arklatex back in 2003. That's when an armored car heist took place. Everyone saw it, and it deteriorated into a shootout with police. Thompson was said to be the mastermind of the plot to rob the armored car. Thompson, whose crimes have prompted descriptions like the worst of the worst, sat quietly in the courtroom today before Judge Catherine Doral while he was arraigned for his most recent charge of second-degree murder. Thompson has been taken back to Angola to await trial, but no court date has been set. Reporting live in Shreveport, Fred Childers, KSLA News 12.
And you heard right, a professional hitman. They've actually written books about some of his murders. So we're now going to see his parole hearing. I'll unpack it with all the details at the end.
You're classified as a fourth felony offender. You're currently serving an 80-year sentence. You were sentenced in May of 2004 in Bossier Parish for aggravated burglary. Jumped. And attempted first-degree murder. You received 30 years on the aggravated burglary, 50 years on the attempted murder. You have a sentence in Caddo Parish, which is running concurrent. It's in March of 2016 for manslaughter. You received a 21-year sentence there. So your parole eligibility date is July 21st, 2023. And you have an adjusted good time date, which is October 18 of 2069. Does all that sound correct, Mr. Thompson?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So, Mr. Thompson, the first thing we'd like to do is for you, you've been through this process, but we do it a little different now. If you would give the panel, the new panel who didn't see you before, why are you in jail? What led you to jail? And why do you think we ought to grant you parole?
I don't know why we did what we did it, tried to do it. I think the 21 years being incarcerated is enough for the crime I did.
So you've served 21 of your 80 years.
Well,
Okay, and as I understand it, you have a detainer with the U.S. Attorney General's office where you owe them 35 years.
yes, ma'am.
Okay, and you say you don't know why you did what you did.
I don't know why we did what we just did.
All right, so you've been in jail. Let's see, we established that. You've had limited programs, I see, although you do have some good time credits. Now, why are your programs so limited?
Why I just have one program?
Yes.
I'm not a drug addict. I never was a drug addict. I didn't need no drug counseling. I'm not managing anybody. Don't need no anger management. I took the victim awareness.
What'd you get out of that program?
Well, I just learned that people be different victims, different circumstances. And why are considered victims?
So let me, before I go any further, let me ask Warden Dozak for her input.
Well, Larry's been here since 2016. He's only had about 6 write-ups total, the last one being in 2015. He's medium custody. He worked in our maintenance department for about 8 years, but now he works in the recreation department as a quarterly. He has a excellent work evaluation from his supervisor. He is active in a helper group, that is one of our disabled stations. And he has several different vocational certificates, while he works in maintenance from here and previously. He does have an employment plan, as a mechanic, and what his employment plan is, and residence plan with his brother and report. We didn't have any disciplinary issues here. He does have medical issues, but it's nothing disciplinary issues.
Okay, good, thank you. So we talked about victim awareness, Mr. Thompson. Through the course of your life, how many victims would you say you have?
And I root for Jay.
And I ask that question because I see in your record, and your record is pretty extensive. It's well over 150 pages at least what was provided to me. There was another murder trial for you in 1984, and I do know that you were acquitted by the prosecution, but that was in New Jersey, but there was some belief that you were really involved in that murder. Then in 2016, the reason you were sentenced in 2016 in, I guess, Caddo Parish, you confessed in 2015 to the murder of someone else in exchange for a reduction in sentence for your son. And then then there was a murder for hire issue. So I'm really concerned about your lack of regard for human life. What would you say to that?
I don't know what to say. I can't answer that.
Okay. Well, let me sit back and listen to my colleagues. Do y'all have any questions? No? Okay, so we'll defer rather to Mr. Richard Ray at the DA's office to hear the position of the DA.
Thank you, Ms. Renassa and members of the board. In 2003, in our local area, there was a armored car heist. Several individuals led by Mr. Thompson stole more than $700,000. They were armed with semi-automatic weapons, ski masks. They robbed an armored car and took the money. They ditched the original car, which was driven by Mr. Thompson. They met up with his son, Larry Thompson Jr. They burned the first vehicle and then fled. There was a Shreveport police officer who picked up the chase of the vehicle and chased it out of Shreveport into Bossier City at speeds exceeding 90 miles an hour. During the chase, Mr. Thompson Sr., Larry Thompson, instructed one of the younger members of the gang to, and this was in the court proceedings, to shoot the MFer, meaning the police officer, and several rounds were fired into Officer Mark Charbonneau's vehicle. I think 5 rounds. Thankfully, one ricocheted off the steering column. It was headed for his chest, but it ricocheted off the steering column and hit him in his arm, but he was unable to continue the pursuit. The pursuit continued into Bossier City, where Mr. Thompson and other members of the gang terrorized local residents, and it was a very large and very violent ordeal, and it was led by Larry Thompson Sr. He was clearly the leader of the gang of much younger criminals, including his son. In fact, in the court proceedings, it's in the record that when he was questioned by police, he was caught later that day. All of them were. But when he was questioned, He told police, "My son wouldn't be here today if I didn't ask him to be," meaning involved in the armored car heist and the shooting of a police officer. Mr. Thompson Sr. said, "He's not a bad person like I am," meaning himself. This officer was shot. Thankfully, he did survive, but he received serious injuries, and the matter was prosecuted in Bossier Parish in 2004, and he was convicted by a jury of his peers of, as was mentioned, aggravated burglary and attempted first-degree murder in the shooting of the police officer. But what's notable, I didn't hear Mr. Thompson express any remorse for any of his crimes, but what is notable that Mr. Thompson has admitted to in either court proceedings or media accounts, he's admitted to a minimum of 4 murders, some of which have gained national attention. And Ms. Manassa, he actually did confess later to that 1984 murder of which he was acquitted. He has admitted to the killing of Maria Marshall in Ocean County, New Jersey. That was a contract killing. He is, and as you mentioned, he admitted less than 10 years ago, he admitted in Caddo District Court involvement in another murder. He is extreme danger to the public. He's an extreme danger to those who have testified against him. He has a history of being a professional criminal and a contract killer, and he has a history of violent crimes. And not only that, but he has a tendency and a history of leading others, younger offenders, including his son, into this type of violent behavior and behavior that is creates an extreme danger to the public. He's admitted to killing Maria Marshall in Ocean County, New Jersey, Deanna Montgomery in Caddo Parish, Larry Wayne Lester in DeSoto Parish in 1988, and he's also admitted to the murder of Chester Underwood in Marshall, Texas. These occurred during the late 70s and into the 80s. Those are the crimes that he's admitted to. He is an extreme danger to the public, and based on his history and the things that he's admitted to, my district attorney, Skylar Marvin, of the 26th JDC, Bossier Webster Parish, would ask that his parole be denied and that he continue to serve his sentence.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for your input and for providing that information. Mr. Thompson, I think that the people are prepared to vote now. There's no other questions, no other testimony. So I'll be voting first because your case was assigned to me. You know, Mr. Thompson, you just seem to be doing okay where you're at. I have the same concern as Mr. Ray expressed based on what I viewed in your record. I do believe you're a public safety risk. I believe you're doing well in the environment that you're in. But my vote today, based on the opposition that's been expressed today and the risk to the public safety, my vote today is to deny your parole. Mr. Tillis?
I concur with.
Ms. Ledoux?
My vote is to deny. I don't think I've read a more concerning report in all the years that I've done this.
Mr. Freeman?
I concur.
Mr. Barra?
I concur for the same reason.
All right. Mr. Thompson, you've received a unanimous vote today to deny your parole. All right.
Not every day you get to see a notorious serial killer, mafioso, hitman. I don't know if he's mafioso, but have a parole hearing. Pretty crazy, right? And what's wild, it's like you see the pictures of him when he got, really what got him busted was doing a crazy armored car heist in broad daylight. And at the age he was at, it's just like, it's like out of a Hollywood movie thing. I mean, what possess you get away with all these murders all your life. They took him to trial for being that hitman. We'll go over it. And then at the age of like 60 something, you decide to rob an armored car. And that's what gets you busted. And then when he gets what, you know, would have been considered a life sentence, I guess, he confesses to all these crimes. Then he comes up for this parole hearing, and I think one just has to assume that, I mean, here's the thing. He has a federal detainer. He's never going to be free again for the rest of his life. It's just not going to happen. So I'm just wondering if, and one has to assume that he's probably comfortable in Louisiana. He has his base, he has his cell, he has, maybe the respect from it's home to him, right? Who wants to get up and move to a federal prison, which I would assume he might have no idea where he'll end up and what his arrangements will be. So I can't imagine he actually would even want parole, expect to get parole. So is he there just for fun of it? Is he bored? I don't know, but he didn't even try hard. Maybe you give him credit for just being the stone cold killer sociopath that he is. I mean, he didn't try to manipulate. He just like, I don't know. I got parole. I'm just, it's interesting. I mean, this is the type of stuff that you might think can help someone with getting their PhD one day, or this could be in like the FBI. This is interesting stuff to see how the mind of a stone cold killer might work. I feel like this is an historic parole hearing in some ways. So thank you, Sir Richard, for sharing that. The idea that he even has a chance of parole, it's just crazy. So there's this was a best-selling author wrote a book on that. I don't know how well the book did, but it was a best-selling author that wrote the book on this. So man confesses to being a hitman hired by husband to kill his wife 30 years ago in cold case, which inspired the best-selling book and TV series Blind Faith. I wonder how many of you have seen this TV series or read this book. Larry Thompson was known in law enforcement circles as a contract killer. He was acquitted of the 1984 murder of Maria Marshall in New Jersey. This week, Thompson admitted that he had been the triggerman in Marshall's murder, which was set up by her husband, who was found guilty of her murder and sentenced to death. Wow. Authorities suspect Thompson could be involved in dozens of other cold case murders. In addition to his confession, Thompson has been indicted in the 1979 death of Deanna Montgomery. Thompson is currently serving a 50-plus year sentence for his botched armed robbery. And again, someone who got away with all of these murders as a professional hitman, you just might, it's like, what? Here's the book. Makes you wonder what made him do such a crazy case, a crazy thing of trying to. Okay, so let's continue. This is interesting. An alleged longtime hitman already serving what essentially is a life sentence in a Louisiana prison now claims that he was the triggerman in an infamous 1984 murder that was the basis of a 1989 true crime novel, Blind Faith, a murder for which he already had been tried and found not guilty. But that's just the tip of the alleged iceberg. For 71-year-old Thompson Sr., he's also been indicted for the 1979 murder of Deanna Montgomery, of Shreveport, and indictments also are expected in the murder of the two other people in two other jurisdictions, one also in Louisiana, one in Texas. Montgomery's husband, Jim, a longtime friend of Thompson, was also indicted this week in the murder of his wife and charged with second-degree murder. Longtime friend of Thompson was also indicted. Wow. Okay. They really didn't like wives. Thompson's current prison sentence is for crimes unrelated for the three murders, and because he's already found not guilty of murdering New Jersey socialite Maria Marshall, he can't be tried again for her murder. Marshall was found shot to death on the side of the Garden State Parkway in New Jersey, September 1984. Despite being identified during his trial as the triggerman, Thompson was found not guilty of the murder. Juries always get it right, right? Marshall's husband, Robert Marshall, however, was found guilty of arranging the murder of his wife and was sentenced to the ultimate punishment. Although that sentence was overturned in 2004 and he's resentenced to 30 years to life in prison, he remains in a New Jersey prison. You know, of course, the death sentence, they're always overturned. Not always. We've had a few recently. 30 years to life. What causes someone to do so? They're so, like, it's like, just get divorced, lose money over it. Really? You want to risk spending the rest of your life in a prison cell? Things I can never understand. Thompson's confession to the murder comes as investigators have started to take a fresh look at a handful of different unsolved homicides in multiple states. The two other unsolved murders in which authorities suspect Thompson are those of Larry Wayne Lester in DeSoto Parish, Louisiana in 1988, and the 1979 murder of Chester Underwood in Harrison County, Texas. Oh, that's interesting. That's Maria Marshall on the left. Authorities are being rather tight-lipped about their overlapping investigations, but law enforcement officials think time is beginning to catch up with the confessed killers who are beginning to come clean about the murders long been suspected of committing. Larry was a notorious criminal. He was feared. Nobody ever testified against Larry Thompson. Robert Davidson, a retired DeSoto Parish Sheriff Lieutenant who continues to work on area cold cases. Testifying against Larry Thompson was like testifying against the drug cartel. Authorities believe Thompson could be tied to several other murders and hope that now that he's behind bars, witnesses who have previously been scared to testify against long-time criminal may start coming forward, or maybe he will, I don't know, just for the attention, boredom, confess to them. Why not? It is. And there are so many articles Sir Richard found, so many. I'm a little curious. Let's continue on because I'm actually curious. This is interesting. I think this is interesting, right? So, Louisiana man admits to role in notorious 80s Garden State killing. So, the man who fired a .45 caliber automatic pistol that killed Maria Marshall in Orange County, most notorious murder case, has confessed his guilt almost 30 years later. Larry N. Thompson, 71, incarcerated in Angola for his part in the unrelated armed car robbery and the attempted murder of a Shreveport police officer, has told Louisiana and New Jersey law enforcement officials that he was the shooter 28 years after a jury found him not guilty. Now languishing behind bars in the 12th year of a more than 50-year sentence for his crime in Louisiana, Thompson confessed 1 month ago that Ocean County Prosecutor Office had in fact gotten it right in January 1985 when they charged him as a murderer. Under the double jeopardy rule of the United States Constitution, no one can be tried twice for the same crime after a verdict and not guilty is rendered. As a result, he cannot be prosecuted. Again, defense witness who deliberately lied on Thompson's behalf also cannot be charged for the statute of limitations of perjury. Yeah, I guess it wasn't fair for me to say that and just to the jury, right? They probably did. They probably followed the rules of the law. It's about unreasonable doubt, and they reasonable doubt, and they probably had a lot of reasonable doubt. So, anyways, Thompson's behalf also cannot be charged in New Jersey is 5 years, and Ocean County prosecutor. Okay. Though there are no legal avenues we can pursue at this time because our laws preclude further prosecution of substantial time has lapsed since the event occurred, we felt it was important to publicize these developments so that family and friends of Maria could have some degree of closure in this tragic event. Yes, I did. Thompson made his admission in a face-to-face interview with James A. Churchill, retired chief of the Ocean County Prosecutor's Office in the mid-1980s. Churchill was the lieutenant in charge of agency's major crime unit. It was Churchill. I love that name, Churchill. I mean, I've never heard of a Churchill other than Winston Churchill. who supervised the investigation of the Marshall murder, and it was he who sought to bring Thompson to justice. Churchill said Thompson was neither a boastful nor remorseful for the murder, just straightforward and unemotional, which is exactly how we saw him today. He answered simply, "Yes, I did," to the question as to whether he fired the gunshots that killed Marshall. Moreover, Thompson admitted that he was aware the witness testifying on his behalf were lying when they supplied him with an alibi that convinced the jury there was reasonable doubt as to whether he was the killer. The murder was the most notorious in Ocean County history and was subject to the best-selling 1989 book Blind Faith. So it was a best-selling book. Any of you looking to buy it? Blind Faith by author Joe McInnes, which in 1990 was adopted into an NBC made-for-TV movie of the same name starring Robert Urich and Joanna Kearns. How many of you have watched it? If you have, let me know in the comment section. Marshall, 42, a wife and mother of 3 boys, was shot twice at close range in the back during a staged robbery at what was then a picnic area on a forested media strip in Garden State Parkway. Her husband, Robert O. Marshall, a once prominent and respected Toms River insurance broker, had orchestrated the elaborate murder-for-hire plot in order to collect a $1.5 million life insurance policy payout on his deceased wife and be free to legitimize an extramarital affair. Oh, like that's not original. While returning home from a night out at Harris Casino in Atlantic City on September 7, 1984, Marshall stopped at the picnic area after Robert Marshall pretended there was a problem with the right rear tire of their 1980 Cadillac Eldorado. To make the crime look like a robbery, Robert Marshall had himself struck on the head and knocked unconscious as he was ostensibly checking the tire. Okay, so he had himself knocked unconscious. The tire itself was slashed at the scene to appear as if the vehicle had been sabotaged in Atlantic City by robbers who planned to follow the couple home until a flat tire forced them to pull over in a remote location. Web of lies. It took 3 months for investigators in the prosecutor's office to unravel the web of deceit that Robert Marshall had spun. He is convicted of capital murder on March 5th, 1986. After 90 minutes of deliberation, the jury sentenced him to death. However, the same jury acquitted Thompson. Another man served in a short jail sentence in exchange for testifying for the state, and a third man was sentenced to life term for connecting Marshall to the murder-for-hire group, all of whom hailed from Louisiana. New Jersey has since eliminated the death penalty, and Robert Marshall will be eligible for parole for the first time this December, according to the prosecutor's office. And when was this article written? May 6, 2014. Gosh, I'm going to do a quick Google search. Robert Marshall, New Jersey prison. Oh, he died. There's a Wikipedia page. Robert Oakley Marshall was an American businessman charged with and later convicted of contract killing of his wife, Maria. The case attracted attention to the true crime author who was best-selling, Yeah, he died. Original sentence to death. In 2006, he was resentenced to life. And with the March 2015 parole hearing pending, Marshall died. So he died before he even got his parole, right before his freedom was within his grasp at the age of 75, which is still young. All because he wanted an affair. He wanted insurance money. Hope it was worth it for you, sir. Hope it was worth it for you. I mean, obviously it wasn't worth it. But, okay. This past October, Churchill was invited to Shreveport to assist in a homicide investigation in Caddo Parish, Louisiana, county called Parish, and a cold case investigation in 1969 in which a woman had been murdered with eerie similarities. And Marshall gets 5 years later. Thompson was their suspect. On April 25th, Churchill interviewed Thompson in the presence of local district attorney in his investigation to Louisiana State Penitentiary. Thompson admitted to Churchill that he was in New Jersey on September 6, 1984 to September 8, 1984, and that it was he who fired the shots that took her life. Churchill said Thompson did not implicate Marshall in the murder. However, Churchill said Thompson was in no position to do so because until the two men were seated together at the defense table in Superior Court, they had never met or spoken. The scheme involved two middlemen. Al Delafave, a spokesman for the prosecutor's office, said the jury in 1986 had reached a not guilty verdict based on a seemingly airtight alibi that placed Thompson in a dentist office in Louisiana with his teenage son, Brian Thompson, on the later date, probably the same son that he confessed to give his son a lower sentence. While his son had testified at his father's trial that this was true, he signed an affidavit last month now asserting that it was his mother who had been with him at the dentist's office that day. A receipt given to his mother, Wanda, by the dental assistant was made out to her husband. The elderly Thompson said his alibi was planned during the time he was in jail in New Jersey awaiting the trial. Thompson stated his alibi witness, which included his wife and brother, were either lying or were mistaken when they testified on his behalf. After the verdict, Thompson returned to Louisiana, where he became involved in other criminal activity. On Thursday, Churchill telephoned the middle son of Marshall to inform him that his mother's killer had admitted guilt and that the news was to be public the next day. Churchill said Chris Marshall expressed appreciation for the phone call and that there was some closure in the confession. I know this is closure for you guys too, he told Churchill. I think it is closure, Churchill said. And there's many more articles. And thank you, Sir Richard, for providing all of it. This stuff is one thing you read about it, you see it in the movies, you hear about these assassins, these killers, and then you can actually see them in the parole hearing with no personality, with nothing there. And as Ms. Ledoux said, one of the worst, or maybe the worst case she's ever seen. And you just to think that if he was in Iowa, he probably, no DA shows up there, he probably gets paroled. Pretty wild stuff. And this DA did a good job. I wish he would show up to more cases. The first time we see him, it takes a serial killer, a professional hitman, to get him up from wherever it is he came. But he did a good job. And what I have to tell you, Richard Ray, ADA, is that we would appreciate it if you made more appearances more often. And with that, I'll let you go.
He's admitted to a minimum of 4 murders, some of which have gained national attention. And Ms. Manassa, he actually did confess later to that 1984 murder of which he was acquitted. He has admitted to the killing of Maria Marshall in Ocean County, New Jersey. That was a contract killing. He is, and as you mentioned, he admitted less than 10 years ago, he admitted in Caddo District Court involvement in another murder. He is extreme danger to the public. He's an extreme danger to those who have testified against him. He has a history of being a professional criminal and a contract killer.
Of Thibodeau, but he was a young man. He was just starting his career. I think he was 23 maybe when he got injured and was confined to a wheelchair for the rest of his life. Forgiveness can be given, but forgiveness does not equate to release. I believe that his sentence was a just sentence. I mentioned that, but for the fact that that bullet went through his nephew's head, and I don't know why at the time, I didn't take the time to research it. He was not prosecuted for the murder of his nephew because he was certainly responsible for it. Ronald Benoit would have died, and he would have faced a first-degree murder of a police officer, and in all likelihood been sentenced to death with the other 2 officers who had those serious injuries. Captain Chasson, he retired as a captain, was a remarkable individual. He never let his injuries get in the way of his commitment to the citizens